All right, there he is. I see him now, and I'm very excited to have him on the podcast because I've been researching him, got the book, and happy to have him on the podcast. Mick West, thanks for joining me.
Very glad to be here, Pete.
So many questions I want to talk to you about, so many issues, and of course I want to get into your book and your work, but I guess I first heard your name and discovered your work in that very long New Yorker article, and I just wanted to ask you if in that article they kind of get your origin story right, growing up in England and being afraid of aliens.
Well, pretty much. But I think perhaps they put a bit more emphasis on the being afraid of aliens thing. That was something I wrote in my book about. There was like a book that I was scared of as a child. I actually looked it up recently, tried to find out which book it was, and it came out in, I think, 1975, when I would have been like 8 or 9 or something like that. And I remember it giving me like nightmares for a few nights. And that was kind of, I guess, one of my first experiences of the whole UFO culture. And then I forgot about it for the next 30 years, and it kind of came back. And here I am.
Well, the point was that you were afraid of something, and so you tried to get to the bottom of it so that you could no longer have to live in fear of that thing. At least that was, I think.
Yeah, it almost like, I kind of wrote something like that, but it wasn't really that big of a deal. I wasn't like trying to solve the mystery of UFOs, so I wouldn't be scared of them. I think perhaps more so with ghosts when I was younger, like when I was like very young, like, before I was 10 and my early teens, maybe, I would have been afraid of the dark and afraid of ghosts. But it never really amounted to very much. It wasn't really like, a big deal. For me,
my big fear when I was that age was nuclear war.
Oh, I kind of had that as well. I used to read books about nuclear war, and there's a couple of kind of dramatizations back then. There was one called Threads, and I think that an American one called maybe The Day After or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I wouldn't watch that movie that came out as a movie, and I remember I still haven't watched that movie because I was too.
Yeah, it was pretty scary. And there was like a famous comic book, When the Wind Blows, when I was young. But and it was very much the national zeitgeist there had that as a backdrop, the fear of imminent nuclear war in the 80s. I remember when I was I was about 16. I was in Germany, and I remember the news came out about the Star Wars initiative with Ronald Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big deal, and everyone was like really concerned about nuclear war like being just around the corner. So people don't think about that now. It's interesting, like the national mood changes.
But the point is that you were a person who, and still is, curious and skeptical and tries to get to the bottom of things. And I think that's kind of interesting to have that be part of your origin story and who you are and who you still are. But then, of course, you went into computer programming. You were like a video game nerd. You ended up creating video games, some very, very famous ones. Sounds like you made a bundle of money and just like, well, you cashed out and around 40 and said, what am I going to do now? And then took the other direction of maybe professional debunker. Is that?
Yeah, pretty much. But I didn't like stop being a video game programmer and turn into a professional debunker. What happened was I originally, I was working at Neversoft, and we'd done all these Tony Hawk games. I'd worked on the first 5 of them. And I just felt like doing something else. And I'd got quite a lot of money already with the Neversoft stuff and Tony Hawk. And so I thought I would leave and figure out what to do. I'd maybe start my own company, do like AI or something like that, or some kind of, I don't know, something to do with text analysis, just things that I found interesting at the time. So I left, and I did a few like consulting things. I actually did some AI for a poker game, World Series of Poker, on the Nintendo back then. But yeah, I didn't set out to become a debunker. It just kind of happened over a number of years, just because I'm interested in science, and I guess like have this lingering interest in strange stuff. Like I used to read 40 Times, and I used to read like the Unexplained magazine, and I used to read a lot of science fiction. So I've always been really interested in those types of things, and I just found things that I could start writing about, like chemtrails. It was just this fascinating topic, or other conspiracy theories, and I just found them really interesting to delve into.
Well, you're the perfect person to do it. I'm glad that your life took the trajectory it did because of your ability. You're in. I guess you have a. I don't know how to describe your intelligence, but basically you're able to explain and understand all kinds of different things and then explain them in a way that really is helpful. I have just become a huge fan of your style, and then you know just your general demeanor. It's like you're not
Yeah.
yelling at people and trying to get ratings and divide people and be some superstar. You've already made enough money, it sounds like, and so you're doing just a really good, helpful thing. But your ability to understand, say, the way camera lenses work, the way graphics work, the way cameras move, the way that the mind thinks, and getting to the bottom of so many things. How do you explain your style of analysis and your kind of Renaissance man skill set to be able to look into and debunk everything from UFOs to QAnon to vaccines, et cetera?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. Like I've been naturally good at like mathematics and stuff like that when I was a kid. But yeah, that in a way itself was just like an accident. I remember at school they gave us a choice of what you wanted to study in a certain study period, and it was either mathematics or English. And at the time, I hated English. For some reason, I just found it really, really boring. I think partly because it was like I was a much faster read than everybody else, and we had to read in class, and everybody read really slow, and I just hated it. But so I chose math, and for some reason that just stuck with me, and I became really bad at English and really good at math.
I actually the English, but I am only saying that to make the joke because I'm talking to one.
Yes, the Queen's English.
I would have gone with the English component, but you're also math leads to, I guess, engineering, and when you're debunking the
Exactly.
9/11 theories, you built actual models
Yeah.
of the buildings to conduct experiments. You actually go out and do actual experiments, and I guess they're accurate. I mean, I don't know anything about engineering. I couldn't debunk you're trying to recreate them.
They're kind of illustrations that I do, illustrations of concepts. So you do something like somebody makes a claim about something like with 9/11, say, you know, the way the towers collapsed is the planes hit near the top, and then the top part of the building started to fall, and it destroyed everything underneath it. And a lot of people think this is a very confusing thing that happened, and they think it's literally an impossible thing that happened. You know, it doesn't matter that the vast majority of the world's engineers think it's just fine. They think, how can the top portion of a building destroy something bigger? It's like, you know, action and reaction are equal and opposite, so it could only destroy something of the same size. You know, some kind of, you know, word-based arguments like that. And so I just basically built a model that was made of 4 segments. Each one was a number of floors. It took me quite a while to do. I built it with magnets. It took me a while to figure out. And then I just pushed the top quarter off, and it destroyed everything underneath it. Just kind of, so it's just demonstrating one principle. Now, of course, it doesn't just demonstrate everything about the collapse, and people get angry at that. But it's a useful thing because people make arguments based on simplistic understandings that are sometimes, like I said, word-based understandings. They make an argument, like they say, action and reaction are equal and opposite, therefore something smaller cannot destroy something larger.
Right.
But then you demonstrate that that is in fact false, and they go, oh, well, interesting. And then you can build on that.
It's hard though. If I'm not a critical thinker in a way that I can hear a well argued point on a technical issue or scientific issue and necessarily have a response for it. Yeah. So I think, like a lot of people, I'm left convinced by something that seems to make sense, me not having any kind of background in this case, physics. And I think that's where someone like you comes in to take a look at it and use everything he's got to research it and debunk it. But isn't that the problem where, well, it's a pretty convincing thing. And now with slick videos, I think it's a game changer, a real game changer.
Yeah.
Slickly produced videos. Anybody can do a great.
What works well is good communication skills, and that works both ways. A lot of people who get into some kind of conspiracy theory or some kind of belief in something strange, like, if people believe about the election fraud, they probably think of that as being true because they have watched a convincing video on it. If you actually are predisposed to believe a certain thing or are very suspicious of a certain party, and then you watch a compelling video, you just believe whatever's shown in the video, and you're not actually doing any research as such. You're just being argued for. I always give the analogy. It's like if you're going into a murder trial, and you just pick one of either the prosecution or the defense to listen to, you're going to go with that guy.
It's a great way of looking at it. If you only listen to one side of the argument, or in this case, the murder trial, then of course you're going to be convinced,
Yeah.
because they're both pretty good at what they do.
Yeah, they both make very compelling arguments, and that's the thing with jury trials. You get two great lawyers often. Sometimes you get one better than the other, but most of the times, you see them on TV. They give their closing arguments, and if you only listen to the closing arguments for the defense, you'd be, oh yeah, this guy, he didn't mean to do it. Let's let him off. Then if you just listen to the prosecution, it's like, this guy's an evil asshole. Let's send him to jail for the rest of his life.
Right.
So it depends on circumstance. A lot of why people believe in conspiracy theories and other strange beliefs. It's kind of like an accidental thing. Like with me, where I am in my life is a series of accidents. At school, they just happened to have this further maths course, they called it back then. Which was the last year they ever offered this course, and there was only me and one other guy that went for it. And the subject of the course was about 30% of it was 3D coordinate geometry, which is exactly what you need if you want to be a really good game programmer with 3D graphics. And it was just pure luck that I happened to take this course in it, and then I became like a successful video game programmer. But I could very easily not have taken that and ended up, I don't know, an accountant or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's also, I suppose, attributed to your aptitude, your interest in a thing to lead you into researching any of these things which you've done. What's the difference, Mick, how do you define between conspiracies and conspiracy theories?
Well, a conspiracy theory is just that. It's a theory. Now, scientists get upset when you call something a theory, because in science, a theory is actually something that works really well, like the theory of gravitation, Newton's theory of universal gravitation, like the equations of motion for dropping things is a theory. Because in science, all we have is theories. We have models of how things work, because we don't really know exactly how everything works. When you get down to the nitty gritty, you don't know how the atoms actually work and how quarks work and how quantum mechanics actually works. But you have all these theories that seem to fit. So a theory, in the common sense, though, getting a bit off topic there, is just a hypothesis. It's a guess or a suggestion as to what might have happened, and it in the common usage it stays a theory because it hasn't been proven to be the case. It's your theory about what happened in something, and conspiracy theories are usually someone seeking to explain a significant event or a significant situation as the secret plotting of a small but powerful group, usually for nefarious ends. And that kind of encompasses most of the conspiracy theories out there. If you think of JFK being assassinated, it was a secret plot by, say, the CIA or the Russians or the Cuban mafia or whoever, or all of them together. So it's these secret plots. Now, a conspiracy is just the simple description of people conspiring that happens all the time. If people say, let's rob a bank tomorrow, they're conspiring to commit a crime, and they can actually go to jail for that part of it. The conspiracy portion of it is actually criminal. And real conspiracies do happen, things that are not theories, things that actually did occur, like, say, Watergate, the cover-up of the recordings of the Watergate tapes and the covering up of the break-in and things like that did actually happen. There's been lots of examples, a bunch of examples I give in my book that I start with. Archer Daniels Midland, a nice food company, used to fix prices. They used to actually fix the price of feed additives. Some of the people who worked there did, with other people. So people conspire to do things, this is known. But when it's a theory, that's when you're just saying you think that people are conspiring to do something.
One of the easiest ways to dismiss Mick West or anybody else is to call them a shill.
Oh, yeah.
You have a chapter in your book called "The Shill Card." How does that get issued to you? How do you deal with it?
What I try to do is be as honest as possible. And I think people think I'm a shill because I'm saying something that's opposite to what they believe. And they've got this idea that they are being lied to already. They think that the mainstream media is lying to them. And they think that politicians are lying to them. Often they are, of course, but they think they're always lying to them. They think everything that Barack Obama says is a lie, or whoever, or everything that Biden says is a lie, everything that Trump says is a lie. So they think everybody is lying. And so when I say something that kind of contradicts their beliefs, they think either I'm just simply mistaken, I don't really know what I'm talking about, or I'm lying. And eventually they see that I do know what I'm talking about. I'm familiar with the material. I'm reasonably intelligent, so they assume that I must be lying somehow. And that I guess from their perspective is a reasonable assumption, because from their perspective, their beliefs are true. They believe, say, that chemtrails are being sprayed from the sky. I come along and say, oh, that's just contrails, and they know in their head that that is false. So they think, why is Mick telling me this? Is he just stupid? And no, he's not stupid, so he must be lying. And they kind of settle on that. But so what I try to do with that is move past that by kind of being as honest as possible and giving them a lot of perspective about who I am and why I do what I do. And eventually it does work sometimes. People get to know me, and they get to know me as a person. Yeah. And they get to know that what I'm doing is honest. I've had a lot of that in the UFO space. It's kind of a conspiracy theory. There's a big cover up by the government. And at first, people they encounter me on Twitter or something like that, and they'll see me like making short tweets about UFOs. And they'll think, oh, this Mick West is a bit of an asshole who doesn't know what he's talking about. And then later on they'll think, oh, this Mick West is some kind of disinformation guy. But then I'll go on like a UFO podcast or something, and I'll have a much longer discussion with people and just be myself and be totally honest about what I am and what my motives are. And people will see that, and they'll say, oh, well, he seems like a reasonable guy.
Yeah, so Twitter is the worst place to find someone's credibility, because everything's out of context. Yeah. And, I read your book, I watch long form interviews with you, even this New Yorker article, I think, and there's a lot more context given. And then you decide, I suppose, where the credibility lies. I get done reading that article. That was back in April. I've been following this UFO thing a little bit, and I've kind of learned a little bit about who the players are. And I've decided to join Team Mick West. Like, I don't know you, but I saw all these different people, one of which you had on your podcast and discussed and debated with Luis Elizondo, which I highly recommend people listen just for the way that you handled things there. And so I just wanted to ask you just about that, because people are going to go down all kinds of different rabbit holes and veins trying to follow who they like. But I wanted to ask you what you thought about this guy, Luis Elizondo, and your conversation with him and his theories, because you were pretty, in my opinion, you couldn't have been more respectful, but you were really sound in all of your arguments. The only issue is that he has a little bit more information, which is top secret, than you do. And you simply kept saying, oh, I'd love to see that. Why can't I see that? So what are your thoughts on him and his arguments for those who might not have heard them? And maybe you don't even think it's a fair question to talk about without all the context.
No, I mean, he's fairly well known, I think, because he's one of the faces of this current UFO flap. And he first came into prominence with Tom DeLonge when Tom DeLonge started this To the Stars Academy, and he was one of the first employees there. And he used to work in the government, I believe, in the Office of Naval Intelligence. I'm not sure exactly what his position was, but he worked on this ATIP program at some point. And I think whilst he was there, the ATIP program is this supposedly secret program that was studying UFOs that was started by Harry Reid in 2008. Whilst he was there, I think what happened was he became convinced by what he saw and by talking to other people that UFOs are actually aliens of some sort. Maybe perhaps extraterrestrials, or as he puts it, like ultra-terrestrials or extra-dimensional beings, but basically aliens. And he became convinced of this, and now he's kind of on a mission. He's on a mission to get UFOs disclosed and get this information out there. And he's part of kind of basically a group of people who are interested in this type of thing, and they've become convinced that the evidence is there. Now, he's interesting because he claims that he's seen all this very, very compelling evidence that's secret that he can't show us. But what he does show us, these videos, aren't really that impressive. And he did this Discovery Channel show, Unidentified.
Right.
Inside America's UFO.
You tried to say in your interview that he's not making any money from his work, but and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but that doesn't seem honest. He does seem to be making money.
Yeah, I'm sure he probably got paid something for that. I mean, I've done shows with far less involvement than that, and I get paid like $500 or $1,000 for an appearance like that. And he was in for the entire season, so I'm sure he got paid something. Yeah. But I don't know if he's like making a good living off it. You know, I'm not making a good living off it. If I'd stayed making video games, I would have been vastly richer than I am now.
You seem to be fine.
Yeah, I'm okay, but I sometimes I regret not staying. But anyway, that aside, I think what he's doing kind of comes from a genuine belief. I think he genuinely believes that UFOs are some kind of non-human intelligence. And I think the other people involved, like Tom DeLonge, believes that. And I think Chris Mellon believes that. One of the other people that was involved is this government official who helped get the videos released and gave them to the New York Times. And he's the guy who's responsible for the UAP report that recently came out. He got that legislation inserted. These people, they believe that aliens are flying around in the skies, basically. This essentially is literally what they believe, and they feel like they're trying to get it out there. Now, Lou Elizondo, I think he's presenting a certain case. He's kind of arguing. He's like, you know, the lawyer for the prosecution of this case, who's arguing, he's advocating this particular position. And I think perhaps he characterizes the information he has in possibly a way that it's not justified. Perhaps in part because he doesn't really understand it, because, you know, I talked to him about some of the things and he didn't really seem to follow my arguments initially. He wasn't familiar with them. And then he kept backing up his own interpretation of these things based on, you know, what there could be no real other thing. Like there's one thing with the aura, you know, he does this glow. You know, when you look at the gimbal video, it's a bright light, and it shows up as black in the video, but there's a white light around it, which he says is cold, but it's actually just part of the image sharpening in the camera. And yet he still is sticking with this, you know, there's some kind of weird cold glow around this thing, and he won't back down on that. And I kind of think it's partly because he really hasn't looked into it that much.
That's, as a listener to your conversation with him, that's 100% what I came to the conclusion of, which is, here are two guys. One guy is simply more intelligent about physics and math and the effects of cameras and other things, physics in general, than the other guy. The other guy has the intel, but isn't quite as curious, and simply clearly has not gone down and chased down the theories that you have. And when you presented them with him, he's basically like, I don't follow you. And it was just really is, I mean, for a listener, you know, it was an astonishing moment to hear that conversation with him and you, given your analysis and understanding and information versus his.
I think he's a smart guy. He's got a degree in biology, I think, and has done some work, maybe postgraduate work on biology. So he knows science to a degree. But I think, like you say, he just hasn't gone into these particular cases in technical depth. He's kind of stopped with this assessment that, oh, this shows something that's amazing. Let's go with the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
It's one of those examples where when you see a guy like every day who's really tall, you work with him, and then you think he's like the tallest guy, and then you're like, oh, that guy's so tall. And then a way taller guy comes in and goes, oh my God, that guy's even taller. That's how I felt like when listening to Luis. I was like, oh, this guy's pretty interesting. And then when I listened to you talk to him, I was like, oh my goodness gracious, there's not even, there's no match here for these. What you were explaining, it seemed infrared to him at one point, and all these other things that I certainly don't understand, but clearly you do more than he did. And so I thought that was That was very important and interesting. I highly recommend that people go listen to that conversation if you're interested in the UFO flap, as you called it. And so let me ask you about that, because you do these great videos where you use, graphics programs to kind of explain to people and you understand them. And I highly recommend that people are interested to watch your videos, basically explaining what this is, what you think it is, debunking them, but without going into the specific videos, because it's hard to explain here on a podcast. My main question is, how can these things that we're seeing in these videos move so fast without any information or about their propulsion systems? Like, how is it that they are moving that fast? Do you, like, what's his name, Neil deGrasse Tyson, say, listen, sometimes it's okay to say, we don't know how this is working?
Well, in the videos, nothing is moving fast. There's three main videos from the Navy. None of them show anything that's moving faster than a regular plane. One of them shows something that's moving very slow, like probably a balloon or something like that is moving at about wind speed. The other things are not doing anything spectacular. There's this FLIR video that just shows something way off in the distance, and all the movements that it makes are just the camera moving. It appears to shoot off at the end, but that's just the camera losing lock, and the object just continues moving at exactly the same angular rate it was before. The gimbal video, it shows something moving, but it's just the parallax of the plane. It's not actually anything, no real movement. The Go Fast video, it's not moving fast at all. It's just parallax again. And then the newer videos, again, do not show anything. There's this sphere descending to the ocean, and it goes really, really slowly.
Yeah.
And the flying triangle is probably just a plane, and it's moving at plane speed through the sky. So, saying how can these things move so fast? What that's based on is eyewitness accounts and eyewitness recollections of radar data. So things can move very fast on radar if there's some kind of glitch. If the radar has a target and then it pops over to somewhere else because it's just locking, it thinks it's the same target in a different position. Maybe there's some kind of atmospheric interference or something like that, a reflection that changes from a direct path to a reflected path can change the position. Eyewitness accounts, people misperceive how they look at things. When you're looking at things in the sky, there's no frame of reference. It's very, very easy to imagine things are moving in a certain way when they're actually moving in a very different way. One thing we see all the time with UFO videos is flies and birds get mistaken for giant flying saucers, like over the mountains over there, when it's actually a bird that's like 10 feet in front of the camera, or an insect that's 3 feet in front of the camera. So it's very easy to make mistakes. The videos don't show anything amazing.
I mean, why do you think that there is so much confusion around that? I mean, you simplified it by basically what I'm hearing is it's the camera moving quickly. Then you understand how these cameras work and you've explained them. You really seem to understand the technology. It's mostly, I think, public information in terms of how this stuff works, or you have sources that can help you understand it. But why do you think all the confusion and all the controversy about all of these videos from, pretty serious journalists and analysts?
Well, a great example I like to use here to illustrate this is the Chilean Navy case. Now, the Chilean Air Force has a UFO investigation branch, which is a body of people, like former military people and scientists and public sector people. There's 15, 20 people there. And they had this one case where a Chilean Navy helicopter had seen this UFO and filmed it, got this great video of it. And they spent 2 years investigating it. This task force that they have, the Air Force task force that's specifically set up to investigate UFOs in Chile, spent 2 years investigating this one thing. Couldn't figure it out. They couldn't figure out what this thing was. And they declared that it wasn't a plane, it wasn't a bird, it wasn't a meteorite, it wasn't a balloon, it wasn't a drone, it wasn't all these other things. So it was a genuine UFO. And then they did this big release of the video and an article about it. And then, someone asked me about the video and said, does this look like a contrail to you? I said, actually, yeah, it does. It looks like a contrail. And this was like the day after the video was released. And so I started looking into it. And within 3 days, we solved the case. We tracked down exactly what it was. It was a plane departing from Santiago Airport. They were looking in the wrong part of the sky when they were doing all their ruling things out. They thought it was like 40 miles away when it was actually 80 to 100 miles away. And this body, this government body of experts, former generals, actual generals from the military, could not figure this out. And so I wouldn't be at all surprised if there are cases in the US that are similar. It's not that it's impossible to figure these things out. You just got to get the right people looking at it. And if you've got some kind of UFO investigation body that just has like 5 or 6 people or 2 or 3 people, like in this UAP task force that we've heard about, they're not necessarily going to be able to figure out every case. If the Chileans can spend 2 years on a case and not figure it out, then it's quite plausible that we have the same thing. However, we don't actually know what investigations have been done into these videos. I think it's entirely plausible that the Navy has actually deeply investigated these cases and come to some conclusions, but they're just not going to tell us because it's all classified.
What would your suspicion be as to why they wouldn't tell us? Because it's a piece of technology that they don't want us to know about?
No, I think it's just simply default classification. I think it involves technology and procedures that are classified by default. The video that we see is from this AtFLIR system, which is a Raytheon system. It's a targeting pod, and the targeting pod is designed to lock on to moving targets, which targets on the ground are also moving because you're moving. Like lock onto planes, paint them with a laser, and then shoot them with a missile with the other systems on the plane. So it's this system which got a specific usage, and it's very, very important, and it's still in use, and it's still in combat today, and so it's classified. If you look for other videos, other AtFLIR videos to compare them with, which is what I normally do, you can't find any. You can't find any AtFLIR videos because it's all classified. The best examples that we have of AtFLIR videos are these little 40-second snippets of leaked UFO videos. The Navy didn't want these videos out because it's a classified system. The other stuff, the radar is a classified system. The Spy-1 radar system is very powerful, technically complicated system that integrates with all these other systems. They have this data link system where you can see on the plane what other planes are seeing and what the boat is seeing. It's all very complicated. And if an adversary understood exactly how it worked, or even little bits about how it works, it gives them an advantage in a conflict. So by default, these systems are classified. And these are the systems that they used to observe these UFOs. So if they're going to investigate why a UFO showed up on a video, they have to describe in the report how the video camera works in great depth. They would have to describe, if it's a video, if it's a radar glitch, they would have to explain how the radar works and how this glitch occurred. Right. Perhaps even explaining how it's possible for an adversary to spoof it, or how an adversary could evade the targeting pod by breaking the lock, by making certain movements. It's just why would they take the chance of releasing information that might be useful to an adversary? So it's not because there's some kind of secret flying saucer flying around. It's just because the technology that they use to look at these objects, whatever they were, itself is classified. And so the investigation becomes classified by association.
I would think if governments were confused, they could just call Mick West. Has that happened?
Not yet. And of course, they have lots of great experts. And like I said, I think they probably have already looked into these things behind the curtains.
Right.
And
they already know the answers.
Yeah, I don't know if they know the answers, but they know the range of possibilities. They, I think, probably know that the gimbal system is not rotating. I think that's probably something that they figured out. I think they probably know that the FLIR-1 video is not shooting off at the end at 500 Gs, but it is in fact just losing lock. I don't think it means that they've identified what the objects or the aircraft actually are, but they know that they're not doing anything amazing. They're not. Just
to be clear, when you say losing lock, the camera on the jet locks onto an object so that it can target or surveil it, and then stays on it. No matter where it moves, it follows it around. That's how the technology works until it doesn't, and that's what you mean by losing lock. And then it appears to dart away.
Yeah. it's like I've got my little camera up here right now, and it's doing face tracking on me, and it's got a little box around my face, and you'll see this in other cameras. So if I move to one side, you can't actually see it on the screen here, but I can see that the little box following me. But if I put my hand up like here, it's going to get confused, and the box is gone. So now it comes back again. So it lost lock because something happened. And if I was to move really quickly, it can also lose lock. And if the camera gets obscured, like for any reason, for a fraction of a second, it's going to lose lock, and it had to bop back.
Got it. Right.
So this feature tracking is something that's done based on the video, and you think of like things being locked on as if it's got some kind of tractor beam or something, or laser beam, like tracking it. But it's actually done in this instance, but it's called a passive lock. It's just using the picture that's being received by the camera to lock onto something. And in the video, in this FLIR video from the Nimitz encounter, he's constantly changing the camera, which means that the video is interrupted for a few frames, and so the camera has to regain lock every time it does this, and so it kind of you see these bars widen on either side, and then it catches the thing, and then it recenters again, and at the end of the video, it just simply the camera movement is too big and it loses it, but the object itself isn't really moving.
For more on these specific ones, your blog, your website's really great. Folks should go to metabunk.org. And of course, the book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole, How to Debunk Conspiracy Theories Using Facts, Logic, and Respect. It's a great read, and everybody should get this for a lot of different reasons. I heard you on a podcast, though, back in, I guess, 2019, and you were asked about some of the conspiracy theories that you really didn't love to talk about as much, or that you thought were really the most concerning. And you mentioned the anti-vax theory. Mm. And this, again, is before COVID. And you talked about how dangerous that was and how upsetting that was. And then, of course, we have a pandemic, and that theory just has created, I don't know, I want to hear what you think it has happened, but division across the planet and conspiracies galore about where the virus came from and whether or not masks work, and of course, and most importantly, the vaccines. And so your book is a really important read to help people understand how to talk to their family and friends and loved ones about if they believe any of these, but nothing, as you said before the pandemic, and I would imagine you agree now, is more important and more dangerous than the anti-vaccine theories. Do you agree with that, basically?
Yeah, I think it's the conspiracy theory that currently has the most significant impact. The statistics coming in now about the number of deaths from COVID and vaccinated versus unvaccinated. And it's something like over 95% of people dying now are unvaccinated. So there's very absolute proof there that the vaccines are working, and that if you're not getting a vaccine, you're at risk of dying because of that. And we don't have scores of people dropping dead from being vaccinated, but we do have lots of people dying from the vaccine. But it's interesting. The whole vaccine thing is one of the oldest conspiracy theories out there. You think of it as being a new thing, but it goes back to the days of smallpox inoculation. I believe that was in the 1800s. And there were anti-vax movements back then. There have been anti-vax movements throughout all of history since vaccinations were invented. People have been opposed to this for a variety of reasons. Some people don't like being told what to do, and so it's the idea that you're getting, the government saying you have to take this vaccine. Some people just don't like the idea of putting things into their bodies. Some people are just suspicious, and these other suspicions breed different suspicions about whether it works or not, and they make it very easy for people to make arguments about it not working. But it is one of the oldest conspiracies out there.
As a result, or in response to the 1619 Project, the right and Trump came up with the 1776 Project. And if you look into history, you'll find out that George Washington won the war, potentially, arguably, because he forced the guys the soldiers to be vaccinated, because the British were vaccinating their soldiers, and George Washington knew he had to do the same. And no offense, Mick, but that's how we won. Too soon? Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. We let you
You're
win.
an American citizen now.
Yeah.
So I mean, the history, I just think that's a fascinating history there, that America might not be here had the anti-vaxxers won that argument then.
Yeah, I mean, vaccines are a huge public health victory for a vast number of diseases. Smallpox and polio. These things basically hardly exist anymore
Yeah, the only thing
because of
better, as
vaccination.
someone told me, the only thing more important to humanity than vaccines is clean drinking water.
Yeah.
That's the only thing.
Yeah, it's a big one. Food science is a big thing. Like
Sure.
the way food science has changed crops. If you think of like the things that science has done for us, vaccines, antibiotics, and increased crop yields are kind of like right up there as the big ones that have allowed humanity to survive and grow as long as it has.
So now that we've gotten to this point, at least in the U.S., I can't speak for other countries. I'm not paying as close attention to where some people are saying we're stagnated on the vaccines, and people who want them have had access and have gotten them, and the rest just aren't going to. Do you think there's any method, technique, or mandate that would be most applicable as a public health measure or effort, whether it be nationally or locally, that will work to get to where we need to be with the vaccination rates in this country or anywhere else?
I think some kind of vaccine passport actually is a good idea. I mean, it's not a very popular idea, but it can be something that's largely voluntary. And if people see that life is just vastly easier and more convenient if you've been vaccinated, I think you're going to get people doing it. In addition to the continued public education of the fact that people who don't get vaccinated are getting the disease and dying in relatively large numbers. This is something that should be hammered home all the time. So it's kind of one of these things that you kind of want to put gentle pressure on people, kind of nudge them in the right direction. So having incentives. One thing that happened in California was that they said that you didn't have to wear a mask if you are vaccinated. Now, of course, lots of people who are unvaccinated are going to be just taking their masks off anyway, but most people want to be honest. And so you see people in the stores like now wearing masks who haven't got vaccines, and I'm sure they're thinking, dang, this mask is a real pain. I should get vaccinated. So there are things to do that just basically increase the numbers. You can't really make this one solid argument. There's no silver bullet here, but there's definitely things I think we can do to get more people vaccinated.
In terms of where we're at now with these conspiracy theories and the way that they spread so quickly with slickly produced videos and social media, and you're out there doing your best to debunk them all the time, but you have a chapter in your book called Complications in Debunking. Mm-hmm. What are the struggles that you run into, the challenges that you have?
Well, one of the complications is something we talked about earlier, which is science. And most people don't understand science. And most people who do understand science really overestimate the degree to what other people actually understand.
Is there an example of that?
Well, a simple example I give is like, do people know what chemicals actually are? What's a compound? What's the difference between a molecule and an atom of a substance? We talk about things like H2O. What does that even mean? How can water be a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen?
I don't know if you're asking these questions for me to answer them, but I can say to my audience, I know the answers to all of them and can explain them, but I'll let people look them up.
A lot of people, you probably have some interest in popular science, but most people do not have the faintest idea about these things that seem very, very simple. They seem very simple to the average person. Well, not to the average person who's interested in science, but lots of people really have no idea.
I mean, I'm being cynical. I really don't know any. I was joking, but what I do know, what I do have, which leads us to my second question, is a trust in experts.
Right.
So I'm not one of those people whose trust in experts and expertise and even in institutions has eroded that much. I mean, I feel like I'm a good critical thinker in terms of determining someone's credibility on a thing, their motives on the thing. And so I think that's the next question to you is, where are we in terms of the erosion of trust in experts? That's also not a new thing.
Yeah, no, it's in some ways we have more experts now, and people get to pick which expert they prefer. And you get experts like, Sidney Powell is an expert on election law, and people prefer to listen to Sidney Powell than the people who are actual experts on election law or voting machines or anything like that. because you get to pick your experts. So you can pick your facts. Which facts do you prefer? Which truth do you prefer? And it's a problem, and it's a difficult problem. Historically, we had what you might think of as being arbiters of reality, which would have been the mainstream media. But that comes with issues itself, because you only get that version of reality that the mainstream media wants to put forward, and that isn't always accurate either. If you go back historically, like you had a lot of influence of corporations on what the media put out, and you had the media pushing narratives that weren't necessarily true. And you think, and even now we get, the media isn't this single voice. You've got like Fox News on one side and MSNBC and CNN on the other side, and they're diametrically opposed a lot of the time, except when they're reporting like straight news like a building collapse or something like that. So we've got this fragmentation of things, but there isn't really something that we should be going back to either. I think we've got to try to figure out something new, like a new kind of way of discerning what is true and teaching people how to discern what is true. And I think a big part of that is going to be education of people. It's kind of a two-way thing. Like education of kids is one part of it. We should be teaching kids how to navigate this world of social media and various different information sources. But I think there's also got to be a little bit of attempt to educate the adults as well. I'm not entirely sure how to do that, but there's lots of people who are no longer in school, and they're 20-something or older, and they are getting their information from sources without really any kind of critical thinking. How can we actually get these older people to think critically? I think perhaps there might be some opportunity there with social media and TV shows that go along those lines. I think there's TV shows like Mythbusters are actually really good, because they're entertaining, and they teach people how to evaluate claims and how to figure stuff out. And more of that, I think. We need to have more of that. We should have conspiracy Mythbusters. We should have different shows that investigate things that in a way that makes them interesting.
Are you familiar with Dr. Aaron Carroll, Healthcare Triage, or any of the books that he's written debunking medical myths? And
no, I've not.
You'd love him. You'd love it, because that stuff is so complicated when it comes to the science of nutrition and what we know or don't know. And he's written so much about that, and he's got just what you're saying, a YouTube page that does all of those types of things when it comes to medical myths and health myths and debunking, which is why I love your work as well. I'll let you go, but I really don't want to, and I would love to continue our conversation another time. And you did say something I do have to comment on, which is that you said at some point you have regret leaving your earlier career behind, but with all due respect, sir, you were designing video games, and I'm sure you loved it, and I'm sure you made money, but the work that you're doing now is a huge contribution to what you say. I'm not sure what it's going to take, and I would say it's going to take you continuing to do this work. Like, I'm so happy that you're doing this work and not designing video games. I don't know if that helps at all, but I certainly am really happy to.
I appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's regrets. I have a few, but really too few to mention.
Good.
I made enough money. I could have made more money. But I have a very interesting life now, so it's great.
Good. I'm glad to hear it, and I look forward to having you back, and I hope everybody will get your book and go to your website and support your work. Thank you very much, Mick West, for joining me. Really great.
Thank you very much, Pete. Very interesting.